Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Annette Oltmans. I'm founder and CEO of the MEND Project, and I just want to thank you so much for being here today. February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. So today we're going to dive into teen dating violence, the warning signs and tips for prevention, and how to respond. Our free monthly training workshops bring us together to explore more deeply various issues related to emotional abuse or double abuse. And double abuse is the type of responses that victims, when they're reaching out for help, and those responses are actually harmful. So that's a really important topic to us. We choose topics in our monthly workshops like today that either our followers have requested that we speak about more thoroughly, or topics that have a lot of interest. And that means if you have a topic you would like for us to dig more deeply into, please send your ideas, your concerns, or matters where you'd like more clarification or information to info@themendproject.com. We do record all of our training workshops, so if you're interested in hearing previous workshops, you can, they're all recorded and housed on our training and resource page at themendproject.com or at the MEND Project YouTube channel. Our topic today is one that we don't often talk a lot about in our trainings and in our presentations, but it's super important to us. And this is a longer workshop, so we'll plan to stay on at the end to address all of your comments and questions. That said, it's really helpful if you jot down your comments and questions as they come to your mind. You jot them down and put them in the chat box as soon as you think of them. And if you'd like to make sure that we don't usually say the person's name. In fact, we don't ever say the person's name, but if you're extra cautious, you can send them anonymously by selecting Jill Rice from the drop-down menu, and then Jill will make sure that I address your question or your concern or your comment during our Q&A discussion time. I'd like to ask if you're joining us today because you suspect a teen in your life is experiencing dating violence, or if a teen has disclosed to you that they are, please let us know that in the chat. It's helpful. It just helps us gear our conversation more specifically to those needs. All comments and questions will be shared in a manner that maintains anonymity. So what is teen dating violence? Intimate partner violence has traditionally been assumed to exist between relationships between two adults. Sadly, it's also occurring among teens. Teen dating violence is a pattern of behavior by one teen that is used to control or intimidate their teen partner. It happens in all socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnicities, across all sexual identities, and so forth. Teen dating violence includes one or more of four forms of violence. There's physical violence, there may be sexual violence, there may not be physical or sexual, but there's psychological violence, and we'll get into that. And possibly there's stalking. The center, I want to go through a few statistics because I think they're really important. The Centers for Disease Control defines the various forms of abuse this way. Physical violence occurs when a person hurts or tries to hurt a partner by hitting, kicking, or using other types of physical force, or even using their stronger stature to intimidate the victim into thinking there may be physical violence. Sexual violence is forcing or attempting to force a partner to take part in a sex act or sexual touching where the partner does not consent, or maybe unable to consent because of alcohol or drug consumption, or maybe they've flat out refused and it's not being respected. It also includes non-physical sexual behaviors like posting or sharing sexual pictures of a partner without their consent, or sexting someone without their consent. Psychological abuse as a form of teen relational violence is the use of verbal or nonverbal communication with the intent to intimidate or harm a person mentally or emotionally, and or exert control over that other person. And then the fourth form, stalking, is a pattern of repeated unwanted attention and contact by another person that causes fear or concern for one's own safety or the safety of someone close to the victim, or it also threatens their individuality, their autonomy, their freedom to move freely as they wish amongst their friends. And this type of violence can take place in person or electronically, such as repeated texting or posting sexual pictures of a partner online without consent. Stalking happens by romantic partners, bullies, or even friends. No two dating violence experiences are alike. So I'm going to attempt to list several things, but don't get locked into only my description. Know that it's the same with intimate partner violence in adults. No two situations are exactly the same. However, there are some obvious behaviors that may indicate teen abuse, and those include a partner who is extremely possessive and maybe expresses signs of jealousy, or a partner who demands to see the other's text log or phone call log, or a partner who limits access to others or time spent with friends. It can also look like the teen who is being harmed is becoming very anxious and stressed when they can't reply immediately to their partner's communication. Or perhaps the teen's disposition changes and they appear depressed or anxious on a regular basis. They may be isolating from friends. You may be noticing them pulling away from their friends and being only available to their boyfriend or girlfriend. You may even see marks or bruises on your child that they can't explain, really because they won't explain. And all of these may be indicators that the youth is experiencing teen dating violence. As adults, we can look back at our friendships and romantic relationships upon reflection and see how unhealthy some of them were. But when you are young and within the relationship, it's not always easy to identify unhealthy behaviors. Today's youth are receiving many harmful messages through the internet, social media, the world of entertainment, news, and literature, which tell them that some behaviors like teasing, name calling, jealousy, aggression, and even sexting are normal parts of relationships that everyone simply endures. Yet these behaviors can easily become abusive and eventually develop into serious forms of violence. And it's important that we don't turn off our internal filter against these dangers. When children are taught and accept as true that these forms of unhealthy behaviors and violence are normal, or adults around them don't speak against it and model healthiness, our youth, they don't develop awareness. They actually turn off that internal security alert warning them that their relationship is harmful and becoming emotionally or physically violent. So just how prevalent is teen dating violence? And here's where I wanted to talk about a few statistics. Teen dating violence affects millions of teens in the US. According to the CDC and the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1 in 10 high school students have experienced physical teen dating violence. 1 in 12 high school students experience sexual dating violence. I mean, these are very high numbers, and not only physical and sexual, but with the way technology has pervaded into all aspects of life, it also happens online. In Orange County, California alone, the county in which I live, 1 in 4 adolescents, boys and girls, is currently in a physically abusive relationship. I mean, this is a huge number. The National Domestic Violence Hotline reports that approximately 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men who experienced rape physical violence and or stalking by their partner experience some form of partner violence between the age of 11 and 17 years old. So it shows that if they've experienced teen dating violence in a younger age, they're more likely to experience it again later in life. So again, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men between 11 and 17. Teen dating trickles into college-age students who go off to college after high school. Nearly 1 in 3 college women say they've been in an abusive dating relationship. 43% of dating college women report experiencing violent and abusive dating behaviors, including physical, sexual, digital, online, verbal, or other controlling abuse. That's almost half. Sticking with the topic of college students, one study found that 85% of surveyed college students had experienced at least one traumatic event in their lives, and 22.8% of college students have reported 4 or more what's called adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences relates to a study that was done by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente, where they studied children over many years into adult life. It's called the ACEs study, ACE''S. And it basically showed how kids who experienced traumatic events or lengthy recurring traumatic events in relationships were more likely to have long-term mental and physical health problems later in life. So here's just a few key facts that statistics regarding intimate partner violence and trauma found among youth. Women between the ages of 16 and 24 have the highest per capita rate of dating or intimate partner violence. Roughly 2/3 of incoming undergraduate students have reported exposure to trauma, and nearly 10% of those develop post-traumatic stress symptoms. 1 in 5 college women has been verbally abused by a dating partner, while 1 in 6 college women has been sexually abused in a dating relationship. Verbal abuse is more prevalent, and most student victims rarely make a formal report of these forms of abuses. Identifying abuse in general can be really challenging. It's confusing, especially when it's emotional abuse. So it makes reporting emotional abuse even that more unlikely. And covert emotional abuse, which is the common thread in all relationship abuse cases. What I mean is relational abuse. So covert emotional abuse would not be present in a one-time sexual assault or a one-time physical assault if it's by a stranger. But when they're in a relationship, whether it's parent-child relationship, friend relationship, or their sexual partner relationship, this covert emotional abuse is the hidden form of abuse. The manipulative behaviors that are hard to describe and hard to identify and therefore impossible to confront. It's when there can be coercion or control, manipulation, a number of ways that pressures sexual relations or control over their partner's time, limits on their ability to continue to socialize with other friends. There's so many layers that goes into that, and I'll talk a little bit more in a minute. But to continue with a few statistics, a staggering number of teens, approximately 84% of victims of teen dating violence, are psychologically abused by their partners, according to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Half are physically abused, and 1/3 experience sexual coercion. Nowadays, we are talking more and more about a new form of abuse, digital or online abuse, where victims of digital abuse and harassment are twice as likely to be physically abused, twice as likely to be psychologically abused, and five times as likely to be sexually coerced. The most frequent form of harassment experienced by almost 1 in 10 teens in relationships is having a partner tamper with their social media account. Social media, texts, and emails provide abusive partners with just another tool to cause them harm, to manipulate, to power over, to control. Clearly, there are many statistics surrounding teen dating violence. And I share all of that with you because I think it's so important to be aware of just how prevalent teen dating violence actually is. So how do our teens find themselves in these situations? There are many possible reasons for the rise in teen dating violence. Among them is the overexposure to violence through easy internet access and the frequency of witnessing violent intimate partnerships through various media outlets. Studies show that children are among the largest population of internet pornography users and addicts, probably because it's so easy to access. And many children lack the oversight from adult caretakers who are technologically savvy enough to block a child's access to porn. Unsupervised pornography and similar media are teaching children that violence within intimate relationships is normal. In fact, it is said that due to its critical influence, young people have come to expect violence in romantic relationships, paving the child's path to accept teen dating violence. Unfortunately, it's so prevalent that February has become Teen Dating Violence Month. And while we celebrate our partnership with other organizations to increase awareness of this important issue for our youth, we're saddened by the fact that we need to do it at all. Children should never have to experience teen dating violence, let alone come to expect violence within any relationship. Teen dating violence is an adverse childhood experience, meaning it is a traumatic event that has long-lasting effects on the one who has been harmed. A few minutes ago, I talked about the ACEs study and how children and youth with adverse childhood experiences are more prone to significant physical and mental health issues, use of drugs and alcohol, and their future opportunities with education and work are also often negatively impacted. These unhealthy and abusive, sometimes violent relationships impact teens, creating countless issues and effects that can sadly last a lifetime. I mentioned how adults in domestic violence relationships, how studies show that they had experienced teen dating violence before their adult relationship. So it has a way of shaping someone, of really affecting their view of themselves, their self-worth, and it becomes normalized. Hopelessness and anxiety, excessive worry, depression, self-harm to cope, substance abuse, eating disorders, dramatic changes in weight and or appearance, extreme mood swings, risky sexual behavior, becoming withdrawn, isolating, antisocial behavior, dropping out of activities outside of school, grades dropping, chronic pain, low self-esteem, teen pregnancy, gastrointestinal disorders, and suicide are just, a handful of negative effects of teen dating violence. And so we can see how serious it can be. Also of great concern is the way these early relationships can set the course for their future relationships, which I've touched on. So I mentioned that research shows that teens who are victims of teen dating violence in high school are at greater risk of experiencing future relationship abuse in college and beyond. And so we really want to educate our kids to intervene early so this does not become a habitual pattern. So how can you help a teen know what a healthy relationship looks like? One of our local partners here in Orange County, California, is Laura's House. It's a domestic violence agency, and they provide community education in schools to teach teens this very thing through their HEART program. It's an acronym, HEART. And some of these things they teach lines up so well with us that I want to mention them. A healthy relationship has mutual trust, which goes hand in hand with honesty. Teens need to know that a healthy boyfriend or girlfriend is one they can rely on to be honest. It's not wise to choose a partner who isn't trustworthy, hoping to change them. But many of our teens have this mindset that they can positively influence their partner and cause change. But that's just not a reality. Also, trust is earned over time. So it's important to know that they don't have to trust anyone automatically. Trust is earned. They have a choice who they see as trustworthy based on the tangible behaviors they witnessed over time. And a healthy relationship also has respect and emotional and physical safety and encouragement to be autonomous, to have their own full lives. In other words, when one is discussing their reasonable concerns, their partner respects their perspective, even if they don't necessarily agree. Each partner leaves room for the other to be autonomous and to have their own opinions and beliefs and to make their own decisions that are best for them. Respect shows up when privacy is needed. Boundaries are put in place and respected. Differing opinions or beliefs are expressed, and it's okay. And outside friendships and activities are supported and respected, and their needs are honored. So there's not pressure placed on the child. Their autonomy is validated, both emotionally and physically. Physical safety is more obvious, but when talking about emotional safety, it's important to know that means a partner who does not make fun of you, embarrass or humiliate you, mock and laugh at you, or share your personal vulnerabilities or personal items with others, whether that be photographs or an email that you had access to. It respects privacy and confidentiality. Emotional safety also looks like communicating in ways that are mutually respectful, seeking to understand one another and seeking to resolve conflict in healthy ways. Healthiness consistently demonstrates a genuine curiosity to understand one another, yet not with a demand to conform to the other person's point of view. And emotional safety allows autonomy. I know I've said that several times, but I don't think I can say it enough because I think kids give up their autonomy way too easily. And violent teens, the ones who cause harm, are so willing to try to impose and restrict the other's autonomy. They may make subtle moves to control them, or they may make overt demands. And so it's important to be able to identify both techniques. We have a handout. We have several, but we have a handout that we use in our trainings at the Men Project called The Maze of Confusion. And the maze, if you can visualize what a maze looks like, we use this maze to illustrate a conversation. In the maze, it illustrates not only what a healthy conversation looks like, but destructive behaviors that are employed by one person to stonewall or create roadblocks when communicating with their partner in an effort to really control the conversation and control them in general. So if you think of the maze, you have an entry point and an exit point, and there's usually only one path to make it through. And then you have a myriad of dead ends along the way that interrupt that path. And what I like to, the maze illustrates that a healthy conversation uses mutual respect, mutual curiosity, mutual listening, mutual validation. So you even validate their perspective, even if you don't agree. If you think about, if you're talking about politics, kids rarely are talking about politics these days, but as adults, if you're talking about politics, you can disagree with your friend who has an entirely different belief system, but you can do so respectfully. And that's what a healthy conversation needs to be, even in our teens. And so so I talked about it's mutual listening, mutual respect, a mutual curiosity, mutual validation, and then they move to solutions. So even if you don't agree with one another, you can respectfully agree to disagree and then move on beyond the conflict. But when a teen or adult is dealing with somebody who employs covertly emotionally abusive tactics, those hidden manipulative tactics, they're going to experience nothing but dead ends to stonewall a conversation, to shut the victim down, to power over them. So it would be, it's basically placing barriers in place to stop the conversation. And I'll just go through a couple of what those barriers are. And it would be things like blame shifting. So the victim raises a complaint or concern, and it's perfectly reasonable to do so, or they might say, express their feelings and how the other person hurt their feelings. And rather than respect that and talk about it openly, the other person shifts the blame and says, well, if you wouldn't have done this, then I wouldn't have done that. Or some other blaming methodology that takes the focus off of what the abuser did and lays it at the victim's feet. Or another stonewalling tactic would be deflection, changing the topic and refusing to talk about the issue. Or minimization, minimizing the value of what the victim's concern is, and saying things like, you're too sensitive, rather than really addressing the concern. And when a myriad of these behaviors plays out, if you can imagine the maze with so many dead ends, the victim becomes so confused, they don't understand what's happening. They actually think they are too sensitive or they are at fault, and they begin to doubt themselves. And that's where it's so important to know how to interface with kids, both for the young person and for the person walking alongside them. Going back to a couple statistics, over half of all college students say it's difficult to identify dating abuse is happening. And 58% say they don't know what to do to help someone who is a victim of dating abuse. That's more than half. For anyone who has experienced teen dating violence, first they need to know they are not alone. So often victims will internalize it as something is wrong with them, and they don't even consider that these are ploys being used against them, and that there's many other people in the world who are experiencing the same thing. And so they need to know they're not alone, and they need to identify a safe person they can share their story with. And if that person is you, we have a whole section of our website dedicated to responders. If you go to themendproject.com, it can be difficult to know what to say or what to do. But specifically, our healing model of compassion, if you search for that, gives you tangible steps to be the safe responder, the one that the one who has been harmed desperately needs and deserves to have. So please go to our website for the healing model of compassion. We don't necessarily want to give advice to our teens, even though it's such a natural response, but it's more important to listen to them and just tell yourself you're going to take some time to be nothing but a good listener, somebody who validates them, somebody who encourages them, but does not give them advice. Because so often we as parents will say, well, you need to do this, or you should do that, or well, have you done this, or did you say that? We jump in and giving advice, and it shuts the child down, so they're less likely to share more with you. And what you really want is to glean the entirety of the story. So you need to be patient and just tell yourself you're going to bite your tongue, maybe for a month, maybe for longer than that, until you feel that your child has confided in everything that you can get out of that situation, out of that conversation. And in the meantime, you're modeling to the child what empathy looks like, what a good listener looks like, what a patient person looks like. You're validating them, saying that nothing they did deserves to be treated that way, but you're not demanding them to leave the relationship. Not yet anyways. You are giving them time to process out loud the confusion that they're experiencing. And you're being a solid, patient person that's not shutting them down. Like, you don't say, oh my gosh, that is so abusive. That will then shut them down and they will defend their abusive partner. So we need to limit our emotions and just be patient and calm and be a good listener. Whether you are related to the teen experiencing harm or you're walking alongside one who wants to end an abusive teen dating relationship, first listen and believe them. So use our terms and definitions when you're talking to them. You can get that on our website too. Our terms and definitions lay out, remember I said blame shifting, deflection, minimization, stonewalling. There's so gaslighting. There's so many other terms available on this sheet of terms and definitions. And it's so important that you just print. We offer it for free in a PDF fashion. You can print it out and you can, don't shove it in their face and say, this is what you're dealing with. Say, gosh, what you've described to me reminds me of this behavior, and circle one and say, why don't you take this and read these other behaviors and see if any of them resonate with you. Let the victim from a wellspring inside themselves come to identify that they're in an unhealthy relationship, that they're in a destructive relationship. Without the language of these terms and definition, because language provides clarity to the victim and it provides them validation and the ability to articulate their story, to articulate in their mind even what is actually happening. And so if we don't provide terms and definitions, sorry, I had to collect my thoughts, then there is what we call cognitive dissonance, where the victim actually believes what the abuser is saying. They don't identify harmful behaviors. They even gaslight themselves by saying, well, maybe I am too sensitive, or so many other responses to these crazy manipulative behaviors circling around them. So remember, they are confused and they're full of self-doubt, and clarity is the first necessary step to healing. Language is power. Once they have clarity, then it's more appropriate time to gently talk about what their next steps may need to be. I wanted to just tell you that I just want to give you an example of how one behavior can really affect our children, and parents do it to their kids all the time. I was guilty of this, and so many parents have come forward and said, I do this too. I'm going to hone in on the term minimization. It's so easy when your child comes to you and says, let's say it's the holidays, and they say, I don't like Aunt so-and-so or Uncle so-and-so. And quickly we just say, okay, well, just give them a hug and you can sit at the other end of the table. But we miss the opportunity by minimizing it and just dismissing it so quickly. We aren't using that opportunity to sit down and say, why don't you like them? What's going on? And being calm and patient, not why don't you like them, but something very calm that shows that you want to explore their emotional feelings and what doesn't sit well with them. And then as they share a little bit about what they don't like, it's important, especially if you don't necessarily have to prove the validity, but it's important to validate them so that their perspective is valued. I mean, if they're saying something really unkind, like he has wrinkles or, something like that, then we want to use that as an opportunity for a lesson. But if they're uncomfortable with their behavior, you want to validate them and say, I'm so proud of you for observing that, and for that not sitting well with you. You have a really good barometer. You have good judgment and your perspective is accurate, and I'm really proud of you. And so do whatever makes you feel comfortable. Give them power to say no. Give them power to feel that their perspective was validated by another adult. Children can't develop a true sense of individuality and confidence without the help of adults validating their perspective. And so it's really important to have those emotional discussions with your child. And that means not being too aggressive, not giving advice, but really listening and validating their points of view, as long as they're reasonable. You can empower teens to be kind, but also to use their voice. So often we don't prepare our girls to say no. We teach them to be kind so that the word no feels inside of them. They have a cognitive dissonance about how the word no really feels. They feel like it's unkind to say no, which sets them up for failure when a boy is being too assertive. They don't feel safe and confident to say a firm no, because it hasn't been encouraged. We've spent too much time on teaching them empathy that we didn't spend enough time on self-empowerment. Set them up for success in dating. Educate yourself about the hidden forms of abuse. Educate your teens about healthy relationships. Talk about what healthy, model a healthy relationship and talk about what healthy looks like and talk about what unhealthy looks like. Most youth today are being taught about bullying and maybe sexual assault and how to be careful, but they aren't necessarily learning the signs of an emotionally abusive friendship or relationship. Even when we teach them about bullying, we're not breaking down the psychological ploys, those covert emotionally abusive tactics that make up bullying. Remember I said covert emotional abuse is the common thread in all relational abuse cases. That includes bullying. So they're so confused half the time they don't even realize they're being mocked or bullied because of how confusing these behaviors are. So it's so important to really understand these terms and definitions. will give you a higher emotional IQ. It will improve your emotional language. They're being taught through experiencing, witnessing other friends and older teens going through it, and act like it's like these bullying and abusive dating situations are a normal part of getting older. We need to help our kids with how to identify the signs of emotional abuse, as well as how to handle conversations where they learn to confidently set boundaries. Also teach them when boundaries are not respected, it's not their job to adjust their boundary, it's their job to create a consequence and follow through with something that is really going to limit the other person. It's never too early to start talking about this. Speak with your teens about the subtle forms of abuse and emotional abuse, and tell them if they ever feel uncomfortable with the words or actions of their boyfriend or girlfriend, they can say something and they can do something. They can choose to end their relationship, and they can choose to honor and respect themselves over being mistreated. It's really important for you to help them identify what healthy looks like so they have the comparison. If the relationship is stressful and or confusing for them, don't be afraid to help your teen explore why that's so. On the contrary, if they are the one expressing negative reactions, let's say your teen is the one that's being controlling or unkind, verbally abusive, stand up to your own children and firmly tell them that manipulative and controlling behaviors is destructive and it's abusive. Let them hear that from someone and really confront them on that. And every time you see it, confront it. If the teens are drinking or using drugs, that's when a large portion of incidents occur. So be sure that you do your best to know where your teen is, who they're with, and what they're doing. Or if they are in a dating relationship, they are working hard to keep the relationship together. And let me say it this way. If they seem like they are working really hard to keep their boyfriend or girlfriend happy and trying to keep the relationship together, that is not a life-giving, enjoyable relating experience. And they need to know that we shouldn't have to. So often the victim person is over functioning. They're doing the emotional work to fix everything, to keep it all fine, even though it isn't fine. They take on the blame. They take on the self-doubt. So they overfunction to try to satisfy their partner. And you may see signs of that as well. That is not, it's important for them to know that relationships should be much easier than that. They shouldn't be so difficult that it confuses you and wears you down and makes you have to overwork for both people. In other words, it's like two people are taking care of the abuser, but nobody's taking care of the victim. And they need to see that. Teens in dating relationships are not meant to provide another person's happiness or to accept being treated poorly just so they can be in a relationship. When teens experience a relationship with a critical, controlling, or abusive partner, that typically means the person they are dating is not very happy or secure with themselves. Whether that person is alone or dating someone, they just aren't very happy and are likely scared and insecure inside. In other words, it is an indication that they have not developed into an emotionally healthy person. And because somebody is deeply insecure inside is not a reason for your teen to take on them as a project to build up that lack of security. It's a job that the abuser has to do on their own if they so desire. And that takes a lot of work and therapy, and it's not your child's job to get into an unhealthy relationship to try to fix someone. And teens, like adults, are never stuck in a harmful relationship. There's always a way out. Our teens need to know they deserve to be treated with kindness, respect, and to feel safe. And they may need the help of an adult to safely remove themselves from their relationship. If you have a child you believe might be in an abusive relationship, consider taking one of our courses and learning about the resources available to you. And you can find them on themenproject.com. You can also seek guidance from the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and you can research how to develop a safety plan when they plan to follow through with a breakup and once the relationship has ended. This will help keep them emotionally and physically safe. If you're a parent of a teen, be prepared in case the abuser then retaliates in some way, whether by stalking or media slander and so forth. Learn your rights from local law enforcement and don't be afraid to file a complaint. It can also be helpful to speak specifically with the law enforcement personnel assigned to your school and see how they will respond if the abuser is attending the same school and begins to retaliate, or even if the abuser is from a different school and comes on campus after school. You want to know what their policies and procedures are for handling these things. You can also speak with a resource counselor or principal at your high school and let them know that you anticipate there to be some pushback and what plans do they have in place. Abusive teen dating relationships can be very painful and really shake up their life, their worldview, their self-esteem, and so on. So encourage them on their path towards healthy relationships. Talk a lot about it. Every teen deserves to be surrounded by people that are supportive and safe. You can help your teen identify their safe spaces and their safe people that they can talk to anything about and that they can trust, whether it's certain family members or certain teachers. Maybe there's a really solid friend that they can, or a coach or some other person. Help them identify those people so they know who they can talk to at any time. You may also consider providing your child with a mentor that can help provide them with a safe person that they can confide in, where you know that your values are like-minded, because kids don't always want to confide in their parents. They've been told what to do so much their entire life that sometimes the last person they want to risk confiding in is their own parents. So if you can provide other people that you know are like-minded with you, it can be really helpful for your child, because then they'll hear more than just their parents. They'll hear other adults valuing the same things. And so it'll start to resonate and not just be something that only my parents say. It can really have a positive effect on them. In terms of resources, our MEND resources can be found on our website, themenproject.com, and recorded presentations on our YouTube channel. If you're local to the Orange County area, I mentioned Laura's House has excellent resources along with their HEART program, which stands for Healthy Emotions and Attitudes in Relationships Today. That's what the acronym stands for. If you're outside our area and you're in the US, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is a great resource that can be reached at their website, thehotline.org, or at 800-799-7233. Or you can connect to your local domestic violence agency and see what programs and education they offer on dating violence. It may be really smart to take your child and a group of their friends to a dating violence talk or to go through a class. It's not a class with a lot of homework. It's just very informative and enlightening. If you know someone who has experienced online abuse or you'd like to learn more, there is a resource called endtab.org, endtab.org, with Adam Dodge, who is a fantastic resource. He provides education about digital safety. I also encourage you to locate a skilled therapist if needed. And in addition to finding a skilled therapist who specializes in working with teens, there are also many organizations, such as, I'm giving you another resource, loveisrespect.org. Loveisrespect.org. They have free counseling, mentors, and other resources to help you and your child. And it involves dating violence. And before we move to questions, I simply want to tell you how valuable children and teens are to us here at the Men Project. We firmly believe that they are not too young to learn what makes a healthy relationship and the behaviors that are unhealthy or destructive. And with the right support, they can develop a strong voice to speak up against violence in their relationships, or they can develop a strong voice to help a friend who's experiencing this. So that's what we wanted to share today. Thank you. And now I'm available if you have any questions or concerns, or if anything didn't sit well with you, this is the time to bring it up so we can talk about it.
Okay, Annette, we do have one question and two comments. I'll ask the question first. The question says, is it safe to share this recording with my daughters? They are 13 and 11. If not, what's the safest age to educate them for teen violence? And I know you mentioned some resources. This question came before the end of your talk, Annette. So what would you say about this particular talk for 11 and 13-year-olds?
I think for the 13-year-old, it would be fine. I think the 11-year-old might get a little lost or bored because I'm talking for almost an hour, or you could break it up into snippets, but it just depends on the maturity level of your 11-year-old. I have taught to sixth graders is the youngest age that I've taught the terms and definitions, those covert, emotionally abusive, manipulative behaviors, and they all grasped it really well. They were just nodding their heads and saying, oh my gosh, yes, yes, yes. So that 11-year-old is right on the fence, and you would just have to use your own judgment, or maybe watch it along with her and pause at certain points and explain certain things, something like that. But I think it's a great idea that you take this tangible step to educate them.
Yeah, and parents are so, parents want to know what's available and how to have these talks, and they feel so challenging. And so any way that we can get information to them, even if it's in little tidbits like you
and
said.
The earlier, the better, really. I mean, you want them to be able to understand, but it's so much better to prevent dating violence than to have to intervene once it's occurring.
That's so good. And that actually leads to this comment. It's so perfect. When you were talking about autonomy, this comment came in. My 11-year-old son had his first crush who liked him back in return. They became very good friends to the point of being inseparable. I saw his friendships with his guy friends deteriorate as the crush took over his attention excessively, even when he was with his friends in a big group. He let her pull him away, and it was really concerning. It's exactly what you said about giving up autonomy so easily. He's just so young, and I saw unhealthy patterns, so I had to step in and put strict limits around their friendship and talk to him about this very thing. Very young, 11, right? So it's exactly what you said. It's not too early.
It's so young, and it's probably innocent, but it's really good that you set limits, because you're also teaching your son that it's okay to set limits and that he should for himself. I would be really, I would make an extra point to mention to him that this is to teach him how he needs to set limits for himself to protect his friendships and to protect his individuality. It's not you solely as a parent trying to be punitive and limit him. It's not healthy to be so immersed with another person that you compromise your friendships. Not until you get married, basically. So I think it's probably a good decision to just circle back around and let him know that this is something that he's going to be needing to do for himself as he grows and as he has relationships. And the studies show that if you restrict your child from having a dating relationship as long as possible, that they will make better choices. So the age that the study that I read was 17. And I know a lot of people are not going to tell their child they can't date till they're 17, but the studies showed that if you do, that they are much more likely to not get in an unhealthy relationship. And they're much less likely to become sexually involved before in their early mid-20s, that they have an emotional maturity that wasn't hijacked by being in an emotional relationship too soon before they were emotionally mature enough to handle it.
Really good, Annette. Really, really good. Thank you for sharing that. We actually have some comments that are just thank you for this valuable information. Another that says, I agree, it's so important to start educating early and often about teen abuse and abuse in general. Another one noting that they love the Love is Respect organization, such a great source of information, especially the relationship spectrum, because all relationships are different. Some are healthy, some are unhealthy, and others are abusive or go back and forth. There's another resource. This is great. The chat is really booming right now, so I'm just going to keep going. Another good resource for educators, outreach, and awareness advocates, or anyone in general, is the One Love Foundation.
Oh, yes, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Oh, good. Okay. And the website is joinonelove.org. So if anyone is interested in that. And then the other comment that I had mentioned from earlier, I'll read real quick. We're getting up to the hour. We're doing great on time.
And I still want to say something. So
go say something first. You say
no, tell me the comment. I want everyone to be heard.
Okay. My teenage daughter has experienced multiple traumas in her young life. She has become more difficult for me to parent and now has a boyfriend who is compounding her defiance, who I'm concerned about because he's too controlling, possessive, easily gets jealous, texts incessantly, ... I'm at a loss for how to support her because her behaviors can be so obstinate and seems she doesn't listen to a word I say anyway.
Yeah, if she's had early trauma, she likely has PTSD, and their reactions are so harsh and difficult, and they can be obstinate. I honestly would, if you can afford it, it's so worth it. Even if you had to take a part-time job to afford it, I would get a good child psychologist, not an MFT, but a good PhD who can help her and have conversations with her that maybe you're unable to have, to really talk to her about her self-worth, and go back and look at some of her trauma situations and her reactions, how she's involuntarily reacting to you rather than really responding in a thoughtful way, that she can get help for. And they can also work with her on what good boundaries are and what she should, a lot of kids who have experienced trauma have a lower sense of self-worth. And so that's possibly priming her to accept this kind of abusive behavior that she's experiencing. Jealousy is such a toxic, and incessant texting is so toxic, and you're so wise to see the red flags. I would try to get her help if you could. And I would tap into your local, the resources that have been mentioned, because they have a lot about teen dating violence. But I would contact your local domestic violence agency or even your local school counselor and see what programs are available, what classes, and I would have her start attending these groups that teach what teen dating violence is it will be coming from another person, not yourself. And so that can help your child be more willing to hear the content of what they're saying. And I also wanted to mention on a different topic that boys need to learn how to say no too, because girls are often the aggressor and even the sexual aggressor. It's not just one way. And I think boys need to have a strong sense of self that it's okay for them to say no. And if they're not ready, no is appropriate. That, you know, they're risking pregnancy, and they have a lot of responsibility that's tied with being sexually active or being controlled by a girl. It's going to be just as damaging on a boy as it is on a girl. And I know I used females a lot today, and I want to tell you, for those, if you have to go, but I want to tell you what I did when my son, he's 35 now, so this was many years ago. He was in high school and he had a very controlling girlfriend. And I saw all the signs, and yet he wasn't willing to hear me. And I was really cautious about how much to say. I didn't want to alienate him. And so what I did, and some of you may disagree with this, but I'm a proponent of it, is I reached out. I don't have the resource on the top of my head, but I reached out to a firm that will, I downloaded a program on my son's computer when he wasn't home that I could then tap into that same program and see all the correspondence, any direct messages, any Facebook, anything that he was doing on the computer, websites, emails, anything. I could see it all. And so I didn't let him know that I was doing that, but I just quietly observed. And there were, believe me, many things that I wanted to respond to and had to bite my tongue and just not, because I wanted to get the full picture. And after a couple of months, I printed out the correspondence that his girlfriend sent him versus what he sent back. And her stack was about this thick and my son's stack was about this thin. And it was just a lot of emotional vomiting and abuse, saying that she hated me and hated his friends, all these methods to try to isolate him from the people that loved him. And I just one day decided I'm going to disclose what I've been doing. And I said, I don't judge you. I'm not here to micromanage everything that's going on, but I just want you to see her value system is so much different than our value system. And the way you've been brought up to be kind and to allow people to have their autonomy and to celebrate each other's individuality. And now you have somebody who's really controlling you. Anyways, it was a tangible exercise and it worked, because within a few weeks, he went through the difficult process of breaking up with her. Not that he didn't, he was in love with her. I mean, puppy love, but he really loved her, but he knew it was what he needed to do because he was not in a healthy place. He had given up a lot of his friends and was depressed. And so it needed to happen. And that's just something I did. Do whatever you need to do to protect your kids and to stay informed is what I'm trying to say. So I hope that helps you. I hope you'll reach out to those other resources and continue to educate yourselves on this topic, and join us again as we go deeper into other topics. Thank you so much for being here today. Have a great day.